The shadows of Silent Seth Day had been long for Sundar Pichai, and though his schedule was packed with meetings, presentations, and urgent calls, his mind refused to find rest. It was close to evening, and the golden light spilled through the large glass windows of his home, painting the floors in shades of amber. The house felt unusually quiet, save for the soft clinking of utensils coming from the kitchen. There was something comforting about that sound, a reminder that though his world was filled with CEOs, boardrooms, and billion-dollar decisions, his home was still grounded in simple, everyday life. The source of that sound was Maya, his maid. She had worked for his family for years. Maya was a woman in her late 40s, her hands rough from years of hard labor, yet her spirit always seemed calm and unshaken. She never complained, never asked for more than what she was given, and always carried herself with quiet dignity. Sundar respected that deeply. In fact, he often wondered how someone like her, who earned so little compared to the wealth that surrounded her, could still smile so genuinely, greet his children with such warmth, and pour her energy into making his home run smoothly. Yet, Sundar had begun noticing something about Maya that troubled him. It started as little things. Some evenings, when her work was done, she would rush out of the house almost nervously, clutching her old handbag tightly against her chest. Other times, she looked unusually tired, as though she carried a burden far heavier than the physical chores she performed. And though she never let it affect her work, there was a heaviness in her eyes that did not escape him. Sundar's instincts told him something was wrong, though Maya would never admit it if asked directly. That evening, Sundar leaned against the wall near the staircase, pretending to scroll through his phone while secretly watching Maya as she packed up her things. She looked around to make sure everything was in place, smoothed down her faded sari, and then slipped out quietly. Sundar felt a sudden wave of curiosity mixed with unease. Why did she always seem in such a hurry to leave? Why did she never share where she was going? Logic told him it wasn't his business. After all, she was free to live her life however she chose. But something deeper pressed against his conscience. This wasn't idle curiosity, it was concern. Sundar had learned long ago that real leadership wasn't just about managing people at work, but also about caring for those around you, even if they were invisible to the world. Without allowing himself more time to debate, Sundar made a decision. He grabbed his jacket, slipped on a cap, and followed her out into the street. The air was cool, filled with the sounds of vendors packing up their stalls and children laughing as they played on the narrow sidewalks. Sundar kept a careful distance as he trailed Maya. She walked quickly, her steps carrying urgency, weaving through the busy streets as though she wanted to disappear into the crowd. Sundar had never done something like this before. He felt strangely out of place, like a detective in his own city, his heart pounding as he tried not to lose sight of her daughter Maya. Eventually left the brighter, busier streets and entered a quieter part of town. Here, the buildings were older, the paint peeling off the walls and the roads broken in places. Sundar's chest tightened. This wasn't an area he ever expected to find himself in, but Maya seemed to know exactly where she was going. She finally stopped outside a small, crumbling building with a flickering light above the doorway. Sundar watched as she pushed the door open carefully and slipped inside. For a moment, he hesitated. He could have turned around right there, gone back to the comfort of his home, and told himself it wasn't his concern. But something about that dimly lit doorway called to him. It was as if the truth waited on the other side, and it demanded to be known. He took a deep breath, pulled his cap lower, and followed her in. The inside was starkly different from what he expected. The air smelled faintly of medicine and disinfectant, and the walls were lined with narrow beds, some occupied by thin, weary figures. A single fan turned slowly overhead, barely moving the heavy air. Sundar froze. It wasn't just a building, it was a shelter, perhaps even a place for the sick or abandoned. His eyes searched for Maya, and he found her kneeling beside one of the beds at the far end. Her face, usually calm and reserved, was filled with raw emotion. She held the hand of a young girl lying there, The girl looked no older than 15, her body frail, her skin pale against the thin sheet that covered her. Maya whispered softly to her, her voice trembling with affection and desperation. Sundar's heart clenched. He had never seen Maya like this. The strong, steady woman who carried herself with dignity in his home now looked vulnerable, fragile, almost broken. He took a step closer, careful not to be noticed, and what he heard next made his blood run cold. "Hold on, my child," Maya whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I promise I'll find a way. I'll work harder. I'll do whatever it takes, but don't give up on me. You are all I have." The words struck Sundar like a blow. The girl was her daughter. Mia had never spoken of her before, never hinted that she was caring for someone so sick. Sundar felt a rush of emotions, guilt for not knowing, admiration for her strength, and sorrow for the pain she was hiding. He wanted to step forward to say something, to offer help. But just as he was about to, Maya's shoulders shook, as she broke down completely, resting her head against the bed. The young girl reached up weakly and brushed her mother's hair with trembling fingers, whispering something that Sundar couldn't hear. Sundar stood frozen, his throat dry, his chest heavy. Here was a woman who spent her days making his life easier, smiling through exhaustion, hiding her pain behind a veil of silence while carrying the unbearable weight of watching her child suffer. And in that moment, Sundar realized this discovery would change everything. But before he could decide what to do, the girl began coughing violently, her small frame trembling as the fit grew worse. Maya panicked, calling out for help, her voice breaking through the stillness of the shelter. Sundar's heart leapt into his throat as he rushed forward without thinking. His presence finally revealed. Maya turned, her tear-streaked face shocked to see him standing there. "Sir?" she whispered, disbelief and fear colliding in her eyes. The room grew tense, the sound of the girl's cough echoing painfully, and Sundar knew nothing would ever be the same after this moment. Asterisk. The weight of silence in Maya's eyes widened as she saw Sundar standing there. Her body stiffened, her breath caught halfway, as if the very presence of her employer in this fragile, hidden world shattered something sacred. The coughing of her daughter echoed through the dimly lit shelter, rattling and desperate, pulling everyone's attention. Sundar, caught between his instinct to help and the heavy realization that he had crossed into her most private pain, stood frozen for a heartbeat longer than he should have. He snapped out of it when Maya screamed, "Water, please." Her voice was cracked and trembling. Sundar rushed to a table nearby, grabbed a jug and glass, and hurried back, his hands trembling slightly. Maya lifted her daughter's head with trembling care, and together they tried to soothe the girl's fit. Every cough felt like a knife in the air, a reminder of just how fragile her life was. Finally, the girl's breathing steadied, though her body still shivered, and her small hand clutched tightly at her mother's. "Sorry." Maya stroked her daughter's forehead, whispering prayers under her breath, as though her voice alone could shield the girl from the sickness, eating her away. Sundar crouched beside them, his presence quiet but heavy. For years he had seen Maya as a background figure in his life, always there, always dependable, always strong, but tonight she looked like a woman stripped of every shield, a mother, clinging desperately to the last threads of hope. When the girl drifted back into uneasy sleep, Maya finally turned her face toward him. Her eyes, swollen from tears, carried not only exhaustion, but also fear. "Why are you here, sir?" Her voice was soft, almost breaking. "Please, please don't tell anyone. I beg you." Sundar's throat tightened. He had expected many things: anger, defensiveness, maybe even cold silence, but not this. The way she pleaded revealed the depth of her shame, or perhaps her fear of losing the fragile balance she had built. "Maya," he said gently, "you should have told me. Why didn't you?" Her lips trembled as she tried to form words, but for a moment, none came. Finally, she shook her head, her eyes dropping to the floor. "Because is not your burden, sir. I work for you. Not to ask favors, not to bring shame. This is my fight." Sundar felt his chest grow heavier with every word. Here was a woman drowning, yet refusing to call for help because dignity mattered more to her than survival. He admired her courage, but also felt a sharp pang of guilt. How many times had he walked past her without asking what lay behind her quiet smile? How many times had he accepted her presence in his home without realizing the storm she carried? After she left, "She's your daughter," Sundar whispered, glancing at the frail figure on the bed. "And she's so sick. How long has this been going on?" Maya closed her eyes briefly, her hands tightening around the blanket as though drawing strength from it. "For years, sir. It started with weakness. Then the doctor said it was something in her lungs. I tried medicines. I tried everything. But treatments cost money I don't have. So I do what I can. I work. I save. I pray." Her voice broke again. "But the truth is, every day I fear I will lose her." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the shallow breaths of... Girl, Sundar's mind raced. He had resources more than she could ever dream of. He could change this situation, perhaps even save the girl's life. Yet, he hesitated. Not because he didn't want to help, but because he knew that forcing help upon someone who lived with such dignity could wound them even more deeply than poverty itself. He wanted to speak. But before he could, Mia straightened slightly, her shoulders stiff as though preparing herself for rejection. "Sir, please," she whispered, "forget you saw this. I will still work for you. I will still do everything I must. But this place, this part of my life, let it stay hidden. I cannot afford pity. I cannot afford rumors. If people know, they will see me differently. They will see her differently. And I cannot let her feel that shame." The plea struck Sundar like a knife. Pity, that was the one thing she did not want. What she craved was respect, even in the face of unimaginable hardship. Sundar realized that if he was to help, it could not be as a wealthy employer offering charity. It had to be as a fellow human being standing beside her. Respecting the courage that had carried her this far, he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Maya, I don't see you with pity. I see you with respect. I've always admired you, but tonight, I admire you even more. You're stronger than anyone I know." Her lips trembled, her eyes filling with fresh tears, but she said nothing. Her silence was not rejection. It was the silence of someone who had long forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. Before Sundar could continue, the door to the shelter creaked open, and a man entered. He wore a stained white coat, clearly overused, his face weary but kind. He was the doctor who oversaw this place. He glanced at Sundar briefly, then walked toward Maya and the girl. "Her condition is worsening," the doctor said quietly, checking the girl's pulse. "The infection has spread. Without proper treatment at a hospital, I fear she doesn't have much time." The words hit like thunder. Maya's face crumpled as she clasped her daughter's hand tighter. "Please, doctor, I'll bring more money next week. Just give her something for now. Anything?" The doctor sighed, his voice heavy with helplessness. "I've given all I can with the supplies we have. But it's not enough anymore." Sundar's heart raced. He could not stand by and watch this. Yet he also knew Maya's pride would resist his help. He needed to find a way careful, respectful, but firm to step into her fight without stripping her of dignity. As he rose to his feet, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. It was a call from a fellow board member, urgent and insistent. In another life, in another moment, Sundar would have answered without hesitation. But here, in this fragile room filled with pain and quiet desperation, the world of boardrooms and deals felt meaningless. He declined the call, his decision made. His place, at least tonight, was here. He turned to Maya. "Let me help," he said simply, his voice steady but soft. She shook her head quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. "No, sir. I cannot accept. If people find out, if your family knows, Maya?" Sundar interrupted gently. "This is not about what people think. This is about her, your daughter. If we don't act now, we may lose her. Her breath hitched, her hands trembling as she looked between her sleeping child and the man who stood before her. Her silence stretched long, heavy with fear, pride, and love. Sundar waited, knowing her answer would decide everything. Finally, her lips parted, her voice barely more than a whisper. If I let you help, you must promise me something. Sundar leaned closer. Anything. Promise me, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks, that you will never let her feel like a charity case. Promise me you will see her as you see your own. Sundar's chest ached at the rawness of her plea. I promise, he said firmly. And just as hope flickered in Maya's eyes for the first time that night, the girl stirred again, her weak voice breaking the silence. Mama, who is he? Maya froze, her daughter's question hanging in the air like a thread pulled tight. Sundar felt his heart leap, realizing that the answer Maya chose now would shape everything that followed. Asterisk the promise of dignity. The room grew unbearably quiet after the girl's frail question. Mama, who is he? Her voice was soft, fragile, but her words carried the weight of curiosity and fear. Maya froze, her hands tightening around her daughter's thin fingers, her lips parting but no answer escaping. Sundar, still crouched beside the bed, felt his throat tighten. In that moment, he realized that this child, lying at the edge of life, held more power over the next step than either of them did. Maya finally spoke, her voice trembling. He is someone from my work, Beta. Someone who cares enough to come here. She avoided Sundar's eyes, as if afraid that even looking at him would betray too much. The girl blinked slowly, her eyes dull but intelligent. Though her body was frail, there was a quiet sharpness in her gaze, the kind of wisdom suffering often carved into the young. She turned her head slightly towards Sundar, her voice raspy. You don't have to be here. Why are you? Sundar felt the question cut through every layer of his identity. He wasn't here as the CEO of Google. He wasn't here as a powerful man or as someone with unimaginable wealth. He was here simply as a human being who had stumbled upon a truth too heavy to ignore. Because I need to see, he answered softly. Because sometimes we walk through life not knowing the people closest to us carry battles we can't imagine. And tonight, I saw yours. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though her eyes closed almost immediately from exhaustion. Then don't forget. What you saw, she whispered, her words fading as sleep overtook her again. Maya lowered her head, her tears falling silently. Sundar sat back on the cold wooden stool beside the bed, his heart pounding with emotions. He could not name. The promise he had made to Mia still rang in his ears, that he would never let her daughter feel like charity, that he would treat her as he treated his own. It wasn't just a promise, it was now a weight pressing against his chest, urging him to act. The doctor returned with a chart in his hand, his expression grave. She needs to be moved to a hospital immediately, he said, keeping his voice low but firm. Any delay, and we may not be able to save her. Maya shook her head helplessly. Doctor, I don't have the money. I can't even afford tomorrow's medicines. How can I? Sundar raised a hand gently to stop her. Maya, let me handle this. I promised you dignity, and I will keep that promise. But right now, this child needs more than words. She needs action. Her lips trembled, caught between resistance and surrender. She looked at her daughter's fragile body, at the shallow rise and fall of her chest, and the fight drained out of her. For the first time, she gave a small nod, her pride bowing to the reality of love that demanded sacrifice. Within the hour, arrangements were made. Sundar called a discreet contact at one of the best hospitals in the city, careful not to draw attention, careful to respect Maya's wish for privacy. He didn't say his name, didn't use his title, just asked for help as a father would ask for his own child. And soon a small ambulance arrived, its siren muted, its lights flickering faintly against the dark street. Maya clung to her daughter's hand as the nurses carefully lifted her onto the stretcher. Sundar followed closely, watching every movement, his heart thudding with urgency. The ride to the hospital was tense. the silence broken only by the distant hum of the engine and Maya's soft murmurs of comfort to her daughter. Sundar sat opposite them, his eyes fixed on the girl, praying silently, though prayer was something he rarely leaned on at the hospital. The doctors rushed her inside. Maya tried to follow, but was stopped gently at the door of the emergency ward. "Please wait here," a nurse said firmly. "We'll do everything we can." Maya's legs weakened, and she collapsed into one of the plastic chairs in the waiting area. Sundar sat beside her, his hands clasped tightly together, his mind racing. He wanted to say something, anything, to give her strength, but for once, he found himself speechless. All he could do was sit in the silence, carrying a fraction of her pain on his own shoulders. Minutes turned into hours. Every tick of the clock echoed louder. Every footstep of a doctor or nurse made Maya's head snap up in anxious hope. Sundar watched her, admiring her resilience, but aching at the silent storm inside her. This woman had carried her world on her back for years, and now she sat powerless, her fate resting in the hands of strangers behind a closed door. Finally, the doctor emerged, pulling down his mask. His face was serious, but not without hope. "She's stable for now," he said. "We've managed to control the infection temporarily, but her condition is still critical. She will need weeks of treatment and possibly surgery." Maya's breath caught. "Surgery?" The doctor nodded. "Yes, it will give her a chance at life. Without it, I cannot promise much." Maya's hands shook as she pressed them to her face. She looked at Sundar, guilt and fear tangled in her expression. "Sir, this is too much. I cannot let you carry this." "It is not right." Sundar leaned forward, his eyes steady, his voice calm but resolute. "Maya, listen to me. Sometimes in life we are placed in each other's path for a reason. You've given years of service to my family with loyalty, with care, with love for my children, as if they were your own. Let me do this not as your employer, but as someone who owes you more than I ever realized." Maya broke then, her sobs quiet but uncontrollable. She tried to cover her face, but Sundar gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't push it away this time. Instead, she leaned into it, her pride bending under the weight of a love she could not deny. Just as the heaviness began to ease, the doctor's next words struck like thunder. "But there is one more thing you should know," he said, his voice softer now, as if bracing them for impact. Both Maya and Sundar looked up sharply. "Her illness," the doctor continued, "may not just be about infection. Her lungs show scarring that suggests something more long-term. We will need to run further tests. There's a possibility it could be hereditary." Maya's eyes widened in shock. "Hereditary? What do you mean?" The doctor hesitated, glancing briefly at Sundar before speaking. "It means this condition may not have started with her. It could run in the family. If that is the case, we need to know where it came from. It might change everything about how we treat her." Maya's face went pale. She gripped the arms of the chair, her lips quivering. Sundar saw terror in her eyes, a terror deeper than anything he had seen that night. "No," she whispered almost to herself. "It cannot be. Not again." Sundar leaned closer, his heart racing. "Maya, what do you mean? Not again?" She looked at him then, her eyes haunted, her voice breaking as she uttered words that made Sundar's blood run cold. "Because I've already buried one child from the same illness." Asterisk the buried truth, words hung in the air like a shadow no one wanted to name. "I've already buried one child from this same illness." Maya's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of grief. Sundar sat frozen beside her, his chest tightening with a pain that was not his own, yet felt as heavy as if it were. He had thought he was beginning to understand the depth of Maya's struggle, but in this moment, he realized he had only touched the surface. Maya's hands trembled as she clasped them tightly together. Her knuckles white from the force of her grip, her eyes were distant, staring at the floor as if the memory she had just dragged back into the light was too unbearable to look at directly. The sterile smell of the hospital seemed suddenly suffocating. the hum of machines down the hallway too loud, each beep and buzz mocking the silence between them. Sundar leaned forward carefully, his voice steady but soft. Maya, you never told anyone? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. How could I? What would people say? That I was cursed. That my family carried a weakness we could not escape? After my husband died, I had nothing left but my children. When my boy fell sick, I thought I could save him. I worked day and night. I begged. I borrowed. I carried hope in my hands until it slipped away. He was only 7, sir. 7 years old. One night, I held him as his breathing grew weaker, and before dawn, he was gone. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, she could not continue. Sundar felt his throat tighten. He imagined her, a mother alone, holding her dying child with no one to comfort her, no one to shoulder her grief. He imagined her waking up the next day with the weight of the world pressing down harder, but still forcing herself to move, to keep living because she had no choice. And now, Maya whispered, her eyes glancing toward the room where her daughter lay. It is happening. Again, and I do not know if I can survive losing another. Sundar wanted to reach out, to take her pain and hold it himself, but he knew he could never truly understand the depth of her scars. Still, something in him shifted. He had faced pressure, criticism, and failures in his career, but none of it compared to this. What was wealth? What was power? When a woman like Maya carried silent battles larger than empires. Mia, he said quietly, you are not alone this time. I will not let you face this alone. She turned to him then, her eyes fierce despite her tears. You do not understand, sir. This is not only about money or hospitals. This is about fate, about something in our blood that refuses to let us escape. I buried my son with my own hands. I swore I would never speak of it again because I could not bear the shame. And now, if my daughter's life ends the same way, it will mean I failed them both. Her words were laced with a pain that cut deeper than fear. It was guilt, raw, and relentless, the kind that could break a person from within. Sundar shook his head, his voice firm. You did not fail. You loved them with everything you had. Sometimes the world is cruel, Maya, but your love, that is not failure. That is strength. Her lips quivered, and for a moment, Sundar thought she might believe him. But the weight of years pressed too heavily on her shoulders. Before more could be said, the doctor returned, holding a file in his hand. His expression was serious, his tone measured. We've done the initial scans. Your daughter's condition is indeed severe. We'll need to run genetic tests to confirm if this is hereditary. If it is, the treatment plan will need to change. Maya stiffened, her voice breaking. And if it is hereditary? The doctor sighed. Then it means the illness could affect future generations too. It may explain why you lost your son. But the important thing now is to focus on saving your daughter. She has a chance, but only if we act quickly. Maya pressed her palms together, whispering a prayer under her breath. Sundar watched her, his resolve hardening. This wasn't just about money or hospitals anymore. This was about dignity, legacy, and the possibility of breaking a chain of suffering that had already stolen too much from this woman. He rose to his feet, his voice steady with quiet authority. Doctor, do whatever needs to be done. Order the tests. Prepare for the surgery. I'll take responsibility. The doctor nodded, but Maya turned sharply toward Sundar, her eyes wide with fear. Sir, please, this is too much. You cannot entangle yourself in this. If anyone finds out, they will think, let them think what they want. Sundar interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. What matters is her life. Nothing else matters right now. Maya's tears spilled again, but this time they were mixed with something else, a fragile thread of hope. She looked at him long and hard, as if trying to decide whether to trust the weight of her daughter's life in his hands. And though she said nothing, the silence itself was an answer. The hours that followed were long and heavy. Tests were taken, nurses moved quickly, and Maya remained at her daughter's bedside, stroking her hair, whispering stories from happier times. Sundar stayed close, never intruding but never leaving either dot in the quiet corners of his mind. Sundar thought about his own children, safe at home, sleeping in warm beds, their lives untouched by such struggles. He thought about how easily people like him could take life's comforts for granted, while people like Maya fought invisible wars just to see another sunrise with their loved ones. The test results came late into the night. The doctor's face gave nothing away as he walked toward them, file in hand. Maya rose to her feet, her hands trembling. Sundar stood beside her, his jaw tight, bracing for the truth. The doctor opened the file, his voice steady but somber. The results confirm. Her condition is genetic. This illness runs in your bloodline. It will be harder to treat than we expected, but not impossible. Maya's knees buckled, and Sundar caught her before she could fall. She covered her face, her sobs muffled, her body shaking in his arms. Sundar held her carefully, his heart aching as if the pain were his own. The doctor continued. The surgery will buy her time, but long-term treatment will be necessary. It won't be easy, and it won't be cheap. But there is hope if we act quickly. Sundar's eyes hardened with resolve. Then we act now. But just as he said it, the nurse rushed into the room, panic in her voice. Doctor, her condition is crashing. She's going into respiratory failure. Maya screamed, breaking free from Sundar's arms as she ran toward the ward. Sundar followed, his chest pounding with dread, his mind racing with fear. And as the doors to the ward slammed shut behind the medical team, Sundar stood frozen in the hallway, his heart hammering as the terrifying thought crept into his mind. What if he had already been too late? Asterisk the edge of tomorrow moment the nurse's panicked words hit the air. The entire corridor seemed to shift into chaos. Doctors rushed past, their voices urgent. Nurses wheeled equipment in the ward, and the sound of alarms echoed through the sterile hallway. Sundar stood rooted to the spot, his pulse hammering in his ears, his chest tightening with dread. He had faced boardroom battles, industry crises, even the crushing weight of global expectations. But nothing had ever left him feeling this powerless. Maya pressed her palms against the small glass window in the ward's door, her body trembling violently. She watched as her daughter's frail body convulsed under the fluorescent lights, a tube being forced down her throat, machines screeching warnings as her fragile lungs collapsed under the weight of her illness. Her cries tore through the air. Please save her. Please don't let her go. Sundar couldn't stand back any longer. He walked to her side, gently pulling her back before her knees buckled. Maya, he whispered, his own voice breaking. They are doing everything they can. Hold on for her. But Maya shook, her head violently, her tears blinding her. You don't understand, sir. I have already held a child in my arms as he breathed his last. I cannot go through it again. God cannot be this cruel to me twice. Her words pierced Sundar's heart. He tightened his grip on her shoulders, steadying her trembling frame. Listen to me. You are not alone this time. Do you hear me? You are not alone. If she survives, it will be because you fought for her. If she survives, it will be because you never gave up. And I swear to you, Maya, I will not let her slip away without a fight. Inside the ward, the doctors shouted the instructions. The machines beeped erratically. And for a terrifying moment, the line on the monitor flatlined. Maya let out a scream so raw it echoed through the entire corridor, her body collapsing against Sundar's chest. His arms wrapped around her instinctively, holding her as though his strength alone could anchor her against the storm. Seconds stretched like hours until suddenly the shrill alarm softened. The line on the monitor flickered again, showing faint signs of life. The doctor's voice rang out, urgent but relieved. We have a pulse. Keep it steady. Don't let her slip. Maya gasped, lifting her head from Sundar's chest, her wide, tear-filled eyes glued to the window. Her daughter's body stilled as the machines began to stabilize her breathing. Sundar exhaled a shaky breath he didn't realize he had been holding, his own hands trembling despite the calm expression he forced onto his face for Maya's sake. Minutes later, The doctor stepped out, his coat stained with sweat, his eyes tired but calm. She's stable again, he said, but only barely. We can't delay the surgery any longer. She must go in tonight. Maya fell to her knees, clutching the doctor's hand. Please, save her. Do whatever you must. I will repay you my whole life. The doctor knelt briefly, squeezing her hand. With compassion, this is not about repayment. This is about giving her a chance. But you must be strong for her, both of you. The words hung heavy as the medical team prepared. Maya sank onto a chair, her entire body trembling, while Sundar sat beside her, his mind racing. He had promised dignity, not charity, but how could dignity exist when life itself was slipping away? For the first time, Sundar spoke the thought that had been gnawing at him. Maya, tell me everything. I need to understand what you faced. Not just tonight, but all of it. I can't help, fully unless I know the truth. Mia looked at him with hollow eyes, as though the request had reached into the deepest vault of her soul. For years, she had built walls around her pain, carrying it alone. But here, in the cold silence of the hospital, with her daughters, life hanging by a thread, something inside her broke open. She began slowly, her voice low and unsteady. I was born in a small village. My father was a farmer, poor but honest. I was married young, barely a woman myself. My husband was kind, but fate did not grant us an easy life. When our first son was born, I thought my world was complete. But when he grew sick, everything collapsed. We spent everything we had on doctors who gave us nothing but hopeless words. One night, he died in my arms, and I felt my soul shatter. After his death, my husband fell into silence, and within 2 years, illness took him too. Suddenly, it was just me and my daughter. I promised myself I would never let her suffer the way her brother did. I left the village, came to the city, and worked every job I could, cleaning, scrubbing floors, serving tea, anything. Eventually, I found work with your family. I smiled so no one would ask questions. I stayed silent so no one would see my scars. But every rupee I earned went to keeping her alive. Her voice cracked, her tears falling freely now. And still, it wasn't enough. No matter how much I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, it was never enough. Do you know what that feels like, sir? To give your life and still watch death creeping closer every day. Sundar felt his chest ache with every word. His eyes burned as he fought the tears threatening to spill. He had been praised his whole life for resilience, but this woman, this quiet, invisible woman was the very definition of resilience. Maya, he said, his voice trembling with sincerity, you are not a failure. You are a mother who has carried more weight than anyone. If your daughter lives, it will be because of your strength. And if I have anything to do with it, she will live. Maya looked at him for a long moment, her face etched with disbelief, gratitude, and fear all at once. And for the first time, she allowed herself to lean fully into his presence, her walls crumbling under the weight of her truth. Hours later, as the surgery began, Maya and Sundar sat outside the operating room, the red light glowing above the door. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of Maya's whispered prayers and Sundar's restless pacing. But then, as dawn crept into the sky, a nurse rushed out of the operating room, her face pale, her voice trembling. Sir, ma'am, there's a complication. She's bleeding more than expected. The doctor is asking if there's any family history of this kind of bleeding disorder. Maya's face went white, her hands shaking violently. Sundar turned to her quickly, his voice sharp but concerned. Maya, is there something you haven't told them? Her lips quivered, her silence louder than any scream. Finally she broke, her voice raw. Yes, there is something. Something I have never told anyone. Not even my husband knew. If they find out, everything will change. Sundar gripped her shoulders, his eyes burning into hers. Maya, if you know something, you must tell me now. Her life depends on it. She trembled, her tears streaming, and then whispered the words that turned Sundar's blood cold. She's not only my daughter. There is more to who her father was. and if that truth comes out, it could destroy everything. Asterisk the truth that heals Maya's whisper clung to the air like smoke. She's not only my daughter. There is more to who her father was, and if that truth comes out, it could destroy everything. Sundar felt his breath falter, his heart pounding as he stared into her tear-streaked face. The weight of her words was heavier than anything he had heard that night, heavier even than the machines inside the operating room fighting to keep her child alive. Maya, he said softly, though his voice trembled. Tell me, please, no matter how painful it is, no matter how much you've hidden it. We cannot carry secrets into that room while her life hangs by a thread. Her body shook violently as she covered her face with her hands. For years she had lived in silence, burying the truth so deeply that she believed it could never rise again. But here, in the cold corridor with her daughter's life bleeding away, there was no choice but to open the vault of her past. After my son died, Maya began, her voice cracking with every word. My husband blamed me. He said it was my weak blood that killed him. His grief twisted into anger, into violence. He would disappear for days, drink until his body was poisoned, and when he returned, his rage fell on me. I bore it in silence because I still had my daughter to protect. But one night, when he was gone, when the world felt like it had turned its back on me, someone else came into my life. Someone I had known since childhood. Someone who had once loved me before I was married away. He saw my suffering. He offered me comfort, and in my weakness, I let him. When I realized I was pregnant, I knew the truth could never be spoken. My husband would never forgive me, and society would tear me apart. I hid it. I carried the secret alone. He never knew. And when my husband died, I buried the truth with him. So you see, sir, my daughter carries not only my blood, but his. If this comes out, her very existence will be judged. People will call her illegitimate. They will strip away the dignity I fought so hard to give her. That is why I never told anyone. That is why I swore to carry this shame silently, no matter the cost. Her body collapsed into sobs, her hands trembling as if the confession itself had broken her into pieces. Sundar sat frozen, his mind spinning. This revelation changed everything, not about the girl's worth, but about the life Maya had endured, the impossible choices she had made in the shadows of pain. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his voice calm but resolute. Maya, listen to me. Your daughter's life is not a shame. It is not a sin. She is a child who deserves love, dignity, and a chance at tomorrow. The world may be cruel, but I promise you, I will never let her story be twisted into shame. Not while I stand beside you. Her tearful eyes lifted to meet his, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of something beyond despair, a fragile, flickering hope dot before either could speak further. The red light above the operating room blinked off, and the door opened. The doctor stepped out, his face etched with exhaustion, sweat dripping from his brow. Maya shot to her feet, her entire body trembling. Doctor? She whispered. The man removed his gloves slowly, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of what he carried. The surgery was difficult. She lost more blood than we expected, but she is alive. Maya's knees gave out and she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing into her hands. Sundar quickly bent down beside her, holding her up as tears of relief filled his own eyes. She will need careful monitoring, medicines, and long-term care, the doctor continued. But the worst is behind her. She has survived.